was a long-awaited report. They said initially they would put it out in September, but don't worry, you don't need to press the button to buy or sell your Caroline coin right now because the Fed is taking no position on what should happen. This is a report that merely outlines the pros and cons. The Fed on the digital dollar looks at the benefits and risks, but takes no position on whether a central bank digital currency, CBDC, should be issued. They are requesting public comment for the next 120 days, and they offer 20 different questions in the report that they would like people to comment on. The quote of the report, the meat of it, is that the Federal Reserve's initial analysis suggests a potential U.S. CBDC, if one were created, would best serve the needs of the United States by being privacy protected, intermediated, widely transferable, and identity verified. Now, what does that mean? Well, that goes into the pros and cons list. On the pros side, for a digital dollar, there would be a currency people could use that would be free from credit and liquidity risk. It would be streamlined, and it would also make cross-border payments cheaper. It would preserve, they say, the U.S. dollar dominance, its role as the reserve currency, and promote financial inclusion, because there are still a lot of people who don't have bank accounts who could be included in the digital dollar. Yeah. On the risk side, it would fundamentally change the U.S. financial system, and this is the big one. It gets to the intermediation. If banks aren't taking in deposits, who's going to make loans? That's a real question, and it also means that the Federal Reserve would be in charge of your banking accounts, even if they are intermediated, if a bank is between you and the Fed, and that would have to be redesigning the financial system. Yeah. It could reduce credit availability, raise costs. It could make bank runs more likely, would change the management of monetary policy. They'd say they'd have to have a much bigger balance sheet. They'd raise significant privacy issues. You could have to design it so that you don't have financial crimes like money laundering. Okay. And then cyber and disaster threats.
Cyber and disaster. Okay, this sounds like a scintillating report. I'm going to get to it after we get off the air. I am curious, though, did they address the issue of, I guess, authority? I mean, we know they technically kind of have the authority to do this, but you would think that if you go about creating a completely new form of payment, of what is effectively a federal form of payment here, that you would want some sort of sign-off by Congress, by lawmakers, the folks who sort of have to make this stuff.
Yeah, well, the Fed is specifically not taking a position at the moment. They're not saying we should do this. If they did, it's an open question of how you would move forward. Obviously, Congress would have to pass a lot of legislation to make this possible. Would it go straight to Congress? Would the other bank regulatory agencies be involved? Would it go through the White House? A lot of questions still left open, and the Fed is making it clear that this is a process that is only just beginning.
I think it is a sign of case, and not just one agency's approach. That our economy would consider also adding a digital dollar, I think, is a huge endorsement to the technology, to the viability of blockchain, which has so many uses, and so I think it's perhaps the most significant part of this order. When the President of the United States is issuing a detailed executive order about cryptocurrency, I think that is a moment that the community celebrates, because it really shows, that cryptocurrency is mainstream.
By Russian entities to evade sanctions imposed by Washington over Moscow's invasion of Ukraine. Biden's order will ask Justice Department to look at whether a new law is needed to create a new currency, with the Federal Trade Commission and Consumer Financial Protection Commission and other agencies. It will study impact on consumers. Other studies will be ordered on impact of cryptocurrency on competitiveness, the market and technical infrastructure needed, and environmental impact of Bitcoin mining.
As to what the consensus for digital dollars will be, e-cash is one of many ideas. Central bank digital currency is another idea that's being put forward. Ultimately, I don't know whether it's going to matter or not, because what we have seen is that the current versions of digital dollars and stablecoins, whether we are talking about Tether, USDC, or UST, about $200 billion in the market's doing just fine using them as digital dollars. Hey, you!
Here, pal, as you know, there's been a great interest in central bank digital currencies. Many countries like China in particular, are focused on establishing a CBDC. You indicated this earlier this year that the Fed would study and issue a white paper on the subject. What is the status of that report?
We expect to publish a report around could be early September or plus or minus, right in that time frame. And the status of it is we're working hard on it right now. But let me tell you what it is really. We're going to address digital payments broadly. So that means stable coins, it means crypto assets, it means a CBDC. That whole group of issues and payment mechanisms, which we think are really at a critical point in terms of the appropriate regulation, and in the case of a CBDC, a central bank digital currency, laying out really questions for the public to respond to about what good it can do, what the costs and benefits of it would be. We want to begin really a major public consultation across many different groups, including Congress, of course, on a CBDC and also on stable coins and crypto.
But so there are certainly advantages to a central bank digital currency or a faster payment system. But there are certainly risks. That's the case, right? This is not a riskless proposition. It's a pretty bold proposition for the Federal Reserve, is it not?
Yes, and we'll lay out the possible potential benefits. We'll put those out on paper, and also, the potential risks that are undertaken. And I think those have been written up in many forums around the world, and I think both are real. And it really depends. A lot depends on the U.S. institutional context and on why we would need a central bank digital currency and how you weigh those costs and benefits. So that's really the nature of the exercise.
And so stable coins certainly have some advantages in terms of a faster payment system and have some of the attributes of CBDC. But there are some risks with stable coins right now. Are there not? Are there concerns you have about stable coins?
Yeah, I think the issue, stable coins are a lot like money market funds or that kind of thing, but without the regulation. And I think we have a tradition in this country where the public's money is held in what is supposed to be a very safe asset. We have a pretty strong regulatory framework around bank deposits, for example, or money market funds. That doesn't exist really for stable coins. And if they're going to be a significant part of the payments universe, which we don't think crypto assets will be, but stable coins might be, then we need an appropriate regulatory framework, which frankly we don't have.
Reserve might want to fix your wallet by turning it from this into this. Though your wallet is still designed for dollar bills, Americans have been using cash to buy things less and less over the years. That's part of why the Fed is considering digitizing the US dollar, giving people money they can access on their phone and bypassing electronic payments that can be slow and costly for businesses. Some see this as a necessary upgrade to the US financial system, but others worry it could potentially upend commercial banking.
There are some very, very difficult questions to answer, but I think we are engaged in a serious program to understand both the technology and the policy issues.
Form of a country's money issued by its central bank that people can use just like cash. It's true that cards and apps already allow for electronic payment, but behind the scenes, these financial transactions involve several steps, settling payments over a patchwork of systems.
The plumbing of the system is still based on a cash system.
Josh Lipsky is the director of the Atlantic Council's Geoeconomic Center and says the U.S. financial system is still pretty old school when it comes to moving money around.
It's based on banks talking to banks saying, hey, I need you to transfer this to me. We've updated some of that over the years, but actually, if you were to look back, a lot of it dates back to the 1950s and before, and that's not a great way to run a modern global economy.
After a debit card is swiped, the transaction can flow through several entities, including point-of-sale systems, payment networks like Visa and MasterCard, your bank, and the merchant's bank. The system can take up to 3 days to move money between accounts, and often comes with transaction fees that can weigh heavily on small businesses, who experts say may have to pass the cost onto customers or put restrictions on card usage. These extra costs can limit their revenues and customer base. CBDCs could bypass the system, allowing digital money to flow directly between two people, in the same way you hand over cash at the register. One method the Fed is considering is issuing digital wallets to Americans directly, or through commercial banks or other financial service providers. The digital dollars themselves would be no more than computer code, possibly stored on a central ledger at the Fed or on a distributed ledger like many cryptocurrencies. When you use your wallet to pay for something, the Fed would take the digital cash out of your wallet and deposit it into the merchants, simplifying the process and doing it without fees. These could be done through an app on a phone, or for those without smartphones, an SMS text message or debit card. Besides frictionless payments, a digital dollar could help the 8.4 million unbanked households who don't have a debit or credit card and can get left behind in a cashless world. For example, instead of mailing checks, the government could deposit your tax refund or stimulus payments directly into your Fed wallet, making the money available immediately. Proponents also say CBDCs offer a much more effective tool for central banks to enact monetary policy. Right now, the Fed influences interest rates across the entire economy by setting borrowing rates between banks, known as the federal funds rate. But this is often a fraught process that doesn't always produce the desired results.
The Fed sets this benchmark rate and other private banks are supposed to queue off it, and then your mortgage is supposed to queue off it. Does that really work? How much time does it take? And the answer that economists will tell you is it works, but there are probably more efficient ways to transfer monetary policy.
Economy that if the Federal Reserve were to assign interest rates to the money stored in digital wallets, it would be much more effective at influencing economic decision making at the household level. According to a January survey, 60% of central banks around the world are currently experimenting with CBDCs. The Bahamas was the first country to release a digital currency, called the Sand Dollar, in October 2020. And China has been developing and testing a digital version of the yuan. But there are questions about how a digital currency would work in the US.
Legitimate digital public money?
And how it could be integrated into the current banking system.
The Fed doesn't want to start dealing with 300 million customers overnight. They're not equipped to do that. So you don't want to call up the Fed at midnight and say, I forgot my password. This is not something the Fed wants to be doing or can do. So they need to think about who to work with to deliver digital dollars.
The Fed would also have to tackle privacy concerns over how anonymous digital dollar payments should be, and whether the money should be restricted to specific transactions or programmed to expire after a certain time period to encourage spending. It plans to release a discussion paper on the benefits and risks of a digital dollar this summer, and has said it wouldn't move forward without support from.
What are the key considerations before issuing a central bank digital currency or CBDC?
Sure. So I think one of the most important considerations that central banks around the world are working through, including the Federal Reserve, is privacy. So when you have a digital asset or a digital currency that runs on the blockchain, which is the underlying technologies of these digital assets, all of the transactions are available to be seen. Now, in the case of a central bank digital currency like a digital dollar, it probably won't be open to everybody, but the government will be able to see it. And the government also needs to preserve the privacy of its citizens, or at least have a process where not just anybody can take a look at it, right? And so those rules and processes need to be in place to preserve citizen privacy before a digital dollar could actually come out. So that's probably one of the most important considerations. The second consideration that, the Federal Reserve in their statement listed a few of them, but the second most important one is really ensuring that our banking system continues to work as well as it does. Today, banks get deposits, they lend it out, they help the economy grow. If the Federal Reserve issued a wallet for its digital dollar, potentially banking deposits could move to that wallet and leave banks, not all of them, but even a few percent leaving could affect the economy. And so the Federal Reserve needs to take that into account, consider those aspects of it, and decide exactly how they issue those wallets for that digital dollar. But potentially they could have the banks issue the wallets, hold the wallets, so this way it doesn't affect the flow of payments and liquidity. And so really those are probably the two most important considerations. The Federal Reserve statement mentioned a few others, but I think those are the two most important. 5% of that $200 to make that transfer. Whereas with a stable coin, it's virtually free. And so using a stable coin in payments is definitely something that could see near term and intermediate term adoption. until eventually we have digital currencies, and then potentially they can both coexist.